Nicholas Tomas Stauskas, born October 7, 1993. In basketball, the role of the great shooter has always been a crown passed down like a family heirloom. Reggie Miller carried it through the 90s, Ray Allen perfected it in the 2000s, and Steph Curry bent the game around it in the 2010s. By the middle of the decade, the NBA was desperate to find who might continue that bloodline of shot makers. Enter Nik Stauskas, a 6'6" guard from Canada with a silky jumper and swagger that made scouts believe they'd found the next heir. At Michigan, his ability to stretch the floor and score in bunches convinced the Sacramento Kings to spend the 8th overall pick on him in 2014, fully expecting the next great shooter in history, with some even comparing him to Klay Thompson or Devin Booker. But the league has a way of exposing even the cleanest resumes. What looked automatic in college didn't translate with the same ease against NBA athletes. Stauskas could shoot, but he wasn't Curry-level quick with his release, nor Ray Allen-level disciplined running off screens. He wasn't a Reggie Miller-type agitator who could bother defenders into mistakes, and unlike the legends he was measured against, shooting wasn't enough to cover his defensive struggles, lack of burst, and inability to create consistent offense for himself or teammates. In a league shifting toward versatility and defense, Stauskas' one elite tool suddenly didn't feel elite anymore. The timing only made it worse. The very year Stauskas entered the league, Curry was taking shooting into uncharted territory, raising the bar higher than any player could realistically match. What once might have been a valuable, specialized career lane for a player like Stauskas was now overshadowed by someone who made even the great shooters look average. It didn't take long before he was shuffled around the league, traded, waived, re-signed, and pushed further into the basketball margins. His story is more than just another lottery miss. It's about what happens when a player is drafted not for who they are, but who teams desperately hope they can become. Stauskas was never meant to be Steph Curry or Ray Allen or even Klay Thompson, but once the label was placed, there was no escaping the shadow. Instead of being remembered as a solid role player, he became another reminder that hype can be as cruel as it is promising. What happened? Let's talk about it. Salute to YUK Loading on IG for this request. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get him. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Nik Stauskas is a 6'6" shooting guard from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. He moved to the US for high school, first at South Kenton, Connecticut, then St. Mark's in Massachusetts, where he gained national attention as a sharpshooter. His reputation grew further at Michigan, joining a program coming off a Final Four run. As a freshman in 2012-13, Stauskas became an instant weapon, shooting 44% from three and helping Michigan reach the national championship game. The following season, he broke out as the team's leader, averaging 17.5, 3.3 assists, and 2.9 rebounds, while hitting 44% from deep. His all-around offensive growth earned him 2014 Big Ten Player of the Year honors. That spring, Stauskas declared for the draft. Seen as one of the best shooters available, he was selected 8th overall by the Sacramento Kings, carrying the weight of being Canada's next NBA star. Stunt number 1, one-dimensional in a multi-dimensional league. From the start, Nik's biggest strength was obvious. He could shoot. The problem was that in the NBA, being a shooter alone rarely guarantees survival unless it's paired with something else. The greatest specialists from Kyle Korver to JJ Redick all carved out lanes not only because of their accuracy, but because they had elite movement, conditioning, or defensive intelligence to balance out what they lacked. Stauskas never developed that secondary identity. In Sacramento, he struggled to adjust to NBA length and speed. What looked automatic in college now required quicker releases, tighter handles, and more versatility. His rookie season produced just 4.4 points per game on 32% shooting overall, 28% from three. For someone drafted as a sniper, those numbers were devastating, especially for a player taken in the top 10. Once labeled as a shooter who couldn't shoot at an NBA level, his margin for error shrank immediately. Defensively, Stauskas couldn't compensate. He lacked the lateral quickness to guard faster guards and the strength to handle bigger wings. On a Sacramento team already full of instability and questionable direction, his weaknesses were magnified. Instead of being groomed as a young role player, he looked like a liability on both ends. By the time he was traded to Philadelphia after one season with the team that took him lottery, The one-dimensional tag had already stuck. In the modern NBA, versatility isn't optional, it's survival. Stauskas entered the league right as wings were asked to defend multiple positions, create off the dribble, and stretch the floor all at once. Without the tools to expand beyond his jumper, he quickly fell behind his peers. Shooting was his entry ticket, but it wasn't enough to secure his place in a league where shooters are abundant and expectations for them are higher than ever. Stunt number 2, the weight of expectations. Being drafted 8th overall brings a pressure few players are ready for. For Nik Stauskas, the expectations weren't just about contributing. He was supposed to justify a lottery pick and live up to the comparisons with some of the greatest shooters in history. When Sacramento took him ahead of names like Zach LaVine, TJ Warren, and Clint Capella, the bar rose even higher. Every uneven stretch was magnified under the lens of lottery talent. The Kings also weren't the ideal environment for a player in need of development. Between 2014 and 2015, they cycled through coaches and front office shakeups, making stability nearly impossible. Instead of being given a slow runway to grow into a reliable role, Stauskas was judged against the very stars he was drafted near, and he fell short, and for understandable reasons. You don't draft a player 8th overall not to have expectations. That reputation stuck even after he was traded to Philadelphia, where he averaged 8.5 points on 32% from 3 in his best season. Good numbers for a role player, but not what teams envision from a top 10 pick. The NBA can be unforgiving when perception turns. Once fans and media see a player as a bust, opportunities dry up quickly. Stauskas' name became a punchline before his career could settle. His role shifted from lottery hopeful to expendable trade piece in just 2 years. By the time he found moments of success like a 57-point game in the G League or short shooting bursts off an NBA bench, the narrative had already been written. Expectations weren't just high, they were unrealistic. Stauskas was drafted to be something he never truly was, and the weight of that label became as heavy a burden as any defender he faced on the court. Stunt number 3, never sticking anywhere. If there's one thing that defined Nik Stauskas' NBA career, it was movement. In just 5 seasons, he played for Sacramento, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Portland, Cleveland, and had short stints with other teams. That type of constant relocation makes it nearly impossible for a young player to establish rhythm, identity, or confidence. Instead of being developed into a specialist, Stauskas was always the piece attached to someone else's trade package. That lack of stability meant he never built the trust needed to lock down a long-term role. Coaches gave him spot minutes, but rarely a consistent rotation spot. One night he might play 25 minutes, the next he'd barely leave the bench. For a player whose entire value came from rhythm shooting, that inconsistency was a career killer and something that made his other weaknesses hard to ignore. Shooters need freedom to miss before they can find their range. Stauskas was rarely granted that leash. His brief flashes only reinforced the frustration. With Portland in 2018, he scored 24 points in a season opener and looked like a revived weapon. Within weeks, he was back to single-digit minutes and eventually moved again. In 2022, he put up a remarkable 57-point game in the G League and signed a 10-day contract with Boston, but the league had already moved on. Once the quote journeyman labels attach itself, opportunities become shorter and shorter. In the end, Stauskas wasn't untalented, he was miscast, mismanaged, and shuffled around too often to ever grow roots and build rapport in one place. Constantly being traded or waived turned him into an NBA ghost, seen everywhere but never belonging anywhere. For a lottery pick drafted to carry the mantle of the next great shooter, becoming a career nomad was the final sign that his NBA story had run its course. All in all, Nik Stauskas' career is a reminder of how quickly promise can fade when the game exposes your limits. Drafted as the next great shooter, he never escaped the perception of being one-dimensional, and the weight of his draft slot made every flaw look bigger than it was. Constant trades and short stints erased any chance to settle into a role, leaving him drifting from roster to roster. In 2022, after one last glimpse of his talent in the G League and a brief contract with Boston, Stauskas quickly stepped away from the game. At just 29 years old, he announced his retirement in March 2023, closing the chapter on a career that once carried so much hype. While he never became the sharpshooter heir he was projected to be, his journey shows the unforgiving nature of expectation and comparison in professional basketball. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth was stunted. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth, and I'm out.